Greetings, I'm Chuck Lennox. I am the coordinator of the Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretation, which is an organization of professional groups from around the world that support heritage interpretation in all its forms. I want to welcome you to our webinar series, Global Excellence in Heritage Interpretation. I trust you will enjoy these webinars from various member groups and from other speakers around the world. I think you'll gain a new perspective on heritage interpretation. Let's introduce our member groups.
Hello, my name is Jackie Lee and I am the chair of AHI, the Association for Heritage Interpretation for Britain and Ireland. And we are absolutely delighted to be part of the GAHI webinar series.
Hello from Interpret Europe. Our community is also happily contributing success stories to this Global Excellence webinar series. Lean back and enjoy.
Hi, my name is Kylie Christian and I'm President of Interpretation Australia. I would like to welcome you to this year's Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretations webinar series. We have a great group of discussions and presentations for you from all around the world, so I do hope to see you online.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. My name is Nick and I am the chair of the Interpretation Network of New Zealand. We are a network designed to bring together interpretation professionals and showcase the best practice happening around our beautiful country of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Hola, mi nombre es Antonieta Jiménez, soy fundadora y directora de Interpat MX, la Asociación Mexicana de Intérpretes del Patrimonio, una asociación fundada recientemente en 2019, y a nombre de la Junta Directiva quiero transmitirles nuestro enorme gusto y entusiasmo de ser parte de esta alianza global.
Hello, bonjour, je m'appelle Jennifer Dick. I'm the chair of Interpretation Canada. We are a community that supports, engages, and inspires heritage interpreters across Canada.
Hi there, I am Paul Caputo. I'm the executive director with the National Association for Interpretation in the United States. We are so proud to be one of the organizing partners of the Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretation Excellence in Interpretation series. So proud to be part of this organization right now, 7 organizing partners from around the world. Thank you all for being part of such an inspiring and amazing profession.
Hi, I'm Tracy Cage, Executive Director of the Interpretive Guides Association, which is a Canadian-based interpretive guide training and certification organization, presently representing close to 2,000 certified members who work as interpretive guides, as educators, and as outdoor leaders internationally. We're proud to be part of the Global Alliance of Heritage Interpretation's family of professionals, and we're excited to explore the world of interpretation with you.
Hello, this is Chuck Lennox again with the coordinator of the Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretation. And I want to welcome you to our webinar series. And I will turn it over to Jim Mitchell of the Association for Heritage Interpretation to introduce our speaker. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jim Mitchell. I am a fellow of the Association for Heritage Interpretation, which is a professional body in Britain and Ireland for those involved and completely immersed in engaging people with natural and cultural heritage. So it's great to speak to interpreters from all over the world. And we have a bit of a story to tell tonight, and Katy is going to join us to tell it. It's very exciting. I've had a sneak preview of the slides, and I am very excited about hearing all of the different stories that she has to tell. The way this came about is we have an awards program every 2 years. It's called our Engaging People Award, and it's basically a celebration of our craft as interpreters. So we get as many different people excited about interpretation, and then we get as many different people to submit projects across a whole range of different categories. And then the 2023 awards took place last year, and they were sponsored by the Corps. And one of the new categories was a category that we really wanted to, the awards team who put the whole show together, really wanted to highlight all around communicating climate change. And Katy, who will join us in a moment, was able to take the award for that excellence in interpretation. So not only did she win the climate award, but also the overall AHI award for excellence in interpretation. So not 1, but 2, which is fantastic. And I'd like to welcome Katy Katie, you there? How are
Yeah.
you doing?
Hi, Jim. Good,
So
thank you.
Katie and I are basically on opposite ends of the UK at the moment. I am right down in the south coast, and Katie is as far north as you can go in Orkney. And thank you for joining us. As I said, we're really interested in hearing your presentation, and I will be here to field any questions after the event. I'll be looking at the chat, so I will be able to field the questions and then present them to Katie, who can answer them. But I think you also have a couple of sort of challenging or ideas, questions for us, don't you?
Yeah, I'd like a little bit of interaction, but not right at the start. You can sit back and relax at the beginning.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, without further ado, I think we'd pass over to yourself and with your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, can you see my slides okay?
Yes, yeah, that's good.
That's good. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much to the Global Association for Heritage Interpretation for inviting me to come and speak, and to Jackie Lee for getting first in touch with our small museum. So my name's Katie Firth, and I'm delivering this webinar tonight on using collections to spark climate conversations. And my job title is now Climate Change Exhibitions and Outreach Officer at Stromness Museum in Orkney in Scotland. As Jim said, we're really far north in the UK. So just to put you in global context, we're an archipelago in the north of Scotland. You can see the circle up here, that's Orkney. So we're actually closer to Bergen than we are to London, and that's reflected in our Norse heritage. We have our local dialect is really closely associated with the Old Norse, and we have a heritage that links with Scandinavian countries, because we used to have a Viking Age earldom centred in Orkney. We're quite famous for Neolithic archaeology, so we have some big excavations here, including the Ness of Brodgar, which you might have seen on the news. And I was born and raised really close to the Ness of Brodgar in Stennis. This is a little bit of a closer up view of Orkney, the archipelago. So not all of the islands are inhabited, but around 20 of them are. And this is Stromness, where the museum is. And just now I'm speaking to you at home in Kirkwall, so that's about half an hour drive. And yesterday I was delivering a school workshop up in Edy, which is this island here, and it took me about an hour and a half to do that boat journey. And it takes as well about an hour and a half from Stromness down to the mainland of Scotland, and that's our kind of main connection with the mainland of the UK. And this slide shows Stromness on the waterfront. This is the town that the museum's situated in. It's got about 2,000 inhabitants, and lots of the properties have got their own piers. You can see these little stone piers that go into the water, and that really indicates the importance of the sea to Stromness and to Orkney as a whole. And Stromness's motto is Per Mare, which means by the sea and of the sea. So the sea was really the highway back before roads were built in the town, and it really gives you a clue as to our connections globally, because in the days of sail, Stromness was a major port. It was a major place to come and get supplies, get workforce for the whaling industry and the Hudson Bay Company, and get water as well. So we were the last place where Franklin's ships, the Erebus and Terror, the last UK landfall before they went to the Arctic. They got water from the well just outside the museum. So Orcadians have always been famous for seafaring, and we're a sort of a stopping off point for global exploration, which is quite nice speaking to you today because you're from all over the world. So this slide also shows you the museum building up here. And just to give you a little bit of a background to the museum, We're a small independent museum. We're a charity run by a board of voluntary trustees, and we're pretty old. We were founded in 1837 as the Orkney Natural History Society. So we're one of Scotland's oldest independent museums. And we were, on average, before COVID, maybe getting about 12,000 visitors per year, maybe a bit less now, which is quite small given the number of tourists that visit Orkney every year. So we're small in the number of visitors we get and quite a small museum in general. But I think we pack a big punch. We punch above our weight. And this is a very old photograph of inside the museum, and some of the old cabinets are still in use today, and some of the artifacts haven't changed too much, but what we do is very different. And the gentleman with the impressive beard is the Reverend Dr. Charles Clouston, and he was the founder of the Orkney Natural History Society. He was a polymath, so he had lots of strings to his bow, and he was really well known as being a great recorder of weather in Orkney. So he created a huge repository of weather records, which we can now use to look back on and examine from a climate perspective. So he was in touch with lots of eminent naturalists throughout the UK. So back then, again, I think Orkney was maybe not as remote as people maybe think. So just to give you a little background to our collection, it's very varied and it has a real mix of types of artifacts. We've got a lot of maritime objects because of that sea connection. We have ship models, sail-making equipment. We have a lot of material to do with the scuttling of the German high seas fleet after the end of the First World War. And we have objects relating to Stromness, to the social history of the town, as you might expect from a town museum. But we also have global collections, ethnographic collections relating to the Arctic, but also elsewhere in the world, such as the Pacific and West Africa. And again, that's because of this jumping off point that Orkney was in the past for ships. And one of the notable ethnographic collections relates to Dr. John Ray, the Arctic explorer. He was a member of the Orkney Natural History Society, and the snowshoes here, they're John Ray's snowshoes. So we think he probably made those because he learned how to make them from the indigenous peoples that he met. And he conducted a lot of exploration work in the Arctic. And he's famous for discovering the fate of the Franklin expedition and also the final link in the Northwest Passage. We also have a small archaeology collection. So this little figure here is one of the oldest representations of a human form from the British Neolithic. This is Buddo, found at Skara and thought to have been lost, but was rediscovered about 9 years ago and is one of our star objects. And I'd like to give Buddo a special mention because it shows the power of museum objects to get people excited. Last week, Buddo went viral on social media on Blue Sky, which is a platform I'm not even on. And we sold out of all our Buddo memorabilia. Even we were shipping 3D models to California last week. It was quite amazing. But finally, as well as those collections, we have quite a large natural history collection. So you might not be surprised because we are Orkney Natural History Society Museum, but we have pressed seaweed, pressed plants, lots of taxidermied birds, some mammals, fish fossils, geological specimens, and other sea creatures. So I think that really sums up the museum and why I love it, because it appeals to my broad range of interests. So I was originally an archaeologist when I left university, but I also worked as a park ranger and developed a real love of the natural world. And that means that I can delve into lots of my passions working at Stromness Museum. But you might think, how did we get into the topic of climate change, which is what we're talking about tonight. Well, one of my early exhibitions at the museum was during Scapa 100. So that was the centenary to mark the scuttling of the German fleet in 1919. So the ships sunk to the bottom of Scapa Flow, which is right outside the museum. And some of them were salvaged, and a lot of the salvaged material is on display, and we made a special exhibition to do with that. And I said I would like to do an exhibition about natural history. So the living wrecks, the way that the wrecks have become artificial reefs for marine life and the ecosystems that they now support. So this exhibition allowed me to explore themes like threats to the museum, the marine environment, and ongoing research in these fields. So back in 2019, I hadn't heard of the term blue carbon before, and it was during this exhibition that I first learned about it. And who knew that our pressed seaweeds collected in the 19th century would have a relevance to the cutting edge research that was happening in Orkney. We were the first place where a blue carbon audit on a regional scale was conducted. And we were able to showcase that in this exhibition. So started to sort of realize, this collection has potential for relevance to these environmental and climate related issues. Perhaps more fun was the outreach that came with the exhibition, and that included working on a community animation. We used VR. It was quite new in 2019. It's kind of more old hat now, but it was quite cutting edge then to give people underwater experiences. And my favorite thing we did, the bottom picture down here, we did our first snorkel safari, which we did with our local dive school straight off the museum pier. So we just come out of the museum onto the shore and into the water. And we coupled that with looking at some of our seaweed collection, and then went out and saw it underwater. So after that exhibition had to finish, we kind of continued with our day jobs, but we definitely started to focus more on the natural history collections. And this included digitizing our natural history collections, like having a shell expert catalogue, a shell collection, having our herbarium digitized and some of it photographed. And it also allowed us to do more outreach, such as this community marine survey that we did. We saw a grant come up and thought, actually, we could apply for that. We could go and do some survey work on the shoreline and involve local schools. So we sort of were starting to ramp up what we were doing. But really, when COP26 took place in 2021, this is when we really started to start applying for funding on the basis that we were going to start doing some climate related work. So this is when we applied for a climate beacons ideas fund for £5,000 to run some climate cafes. And these are the cafes that went on to win the Association of Heritage Interpretations Award for Excellence in Interpretation last year, as well as the Calling Out Climate Change category. So we were really delighted to have our project recognised last year. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about sort of what we did, how we developed the cafes, and then kind of explain their legacy, what's gone on since then. So the purpose of the cafes was really to foster discussion on climate change with our local community. We're a rural farming community, and farming alongside tourism is our main industry. So we decided to work with local audiences like Young Farmers, the Scottish Women's Rural Institute, the Men's Shed, and our local youth cafe, and contacted them directly through sort of mutual friends and things like that to arrange the cafes. And we were sensitive to their needs and kind of adapted to where they wanted to meet us and that sort of thing. And myself and my colleague, we hadn't got any experience in facilitating climate conversations. So we found some training through a connection in our local authority, and we had 2 days training with the Surefoot effect on how to lead climate conversations and how to co-facilitate climate cafes, and that gave us confidence to do it and was definitely something I would recommend. And importantly, the cafes, we didn't design them to be lectures. They weren't us telling people facts and figures. We didn't want to instill anxiety in people. We really wanted to find out what page people were on, and tell us their thoughts. So we called them changes in a lifetime because we thought that would be relevant to anybody. People might have noticed changes within their lifetime that could be attributed to climate change. And it meant that they could come into the topic in a kind of approachable way. They involved us designing a pop-up exhibition. So we featured 6 themes, all backed up by objects in our collection. So these are the first 3 pop-up banners. These are the second 3. And by using objects from our collection, then people who came to the cafes, they could make the connection between the museum and the topic of climate change. And we asked them to choose an object on one of the banners that they personally just had an immediate connection to. And that was really startling to find out how some of them have chosen their object and how articulate some even very young people could be about their object and why it meant something to them and what it had to do with climate change. We also gathered their opinions on various elements of the climate emergency using polling software. So when you get your phone out and you can vote for things. But some of the older audiences didn't want to do this, or we thought they would struggle with it because they didn't have a mobile phone. So we did a paper and stickers approach. But it was important to us. We wanted to know what people thought, and we didn't want to tell them what they should think. And this allowed us to find out what they were most concerned about. So in the slide here, you can see the Scottish Women's Rural Institute were concerned about wildlife, particularly birds, and erosion and weather changes that they were noticing. We also asked them what they wanted us as the museum to start doing to engage people in the climate crisis. And one of the most commonly requested things was outdoor events. So we have developed, as well as the snorkel safaris, we've been running more outdoor events, which I'll show you shortly. To make the cafes fun and hands-on and to do something active, we included a little session where participants stamped their own climate messages or mantras onto little metal jigsaw pieces. And then a local artist created a communal artwork from all their jigsaw pieces, which we displayed. We displayed the artwork in a museum exhibition, so it had a bit of a longer life. And as I mentioned, we really wanted to understand their thoughts. So we asked 192 people in total whether climate change is something they cared about, and 97.4% said yes. So this confirmed we're on the right track. And after the cafes, it gave us kind of evidence that what we were doing was relevant to what people cared about. So from that point on, the staff and the trustees in the museum decided to pivot the museum's focus towards addressing the climate emergency. So the Climate Cafes project definitely had a significant legacy and an impact on our organisation. For such a small project, it's amazing how it changed what we have done since. So the rest of my presentation is going to be talking about what that legacy has been. And as a result of the cafes, now when we have school visits, we consider how they fit into the climate conversation. So we receive frequent requests to have sessions on Dr. John Rae, the Arctic explorer, But now we use that topic to discuss the environment in the Arctic, and we look at how it affects different animals. And it means we can talk to younger audiences about animal adaptation, like how much fur animals have, how big their ears are, and how then climate change is at odds with their kind of natural way of life. Another thing which has changed is my job title. So prior to the climate cafes, I was exhibition assistant, and up until April last year, actually. And then the trustees changed my job title to climate change exhibitions and outreach officer, because they really realised that we had an opportunity to become an anchor organisation in Orkney for environment and climate engagement. So it's quite a mouthful, but it does help to tell people what I do. We've also transformed how we do the snorkel safaris into more of a citizen science marine wildlife monitoring sessions. So we've partnered up with Sea Search, which is an organisation that does marine recording all over the UK. And it means when people come out of the water, we ask them to help fill in a Sea Search form so they can tick different species that they've seen, and we help them identify them so they feel like they're actually getting involved in something practical to record and conserve the wildlife that they've just seen, as well as having a good time under the sea. Our events programming has taken off in terms of its environmental impact. So we've been doing lots of outdoor events, like I mentioned, close to the museum, using our local environment, just on our doorstep, really, to start people really getting interested in nature and wildlife and looking after it. So I mentioned outdoor events. One of the ones we've been using over the past 3 years is shoreline rambles. So it means I take people out along the shore. You can take a girl out of being a park ranger, but you can't take it out of the girl. So I'm always going to be a park ranger a bit at heart. And one of the things I love doing is taking people out and showing them the wonders of the shoreline. And it always comes back to links about climate change, how the marine environment can help to, store carbon and mitigate the effects of climate change, and really inspires people, hopefully, to then protect it and take measures to protect it. Anytime we've had an opportunity to get a grant since then, we've managed to kind of focus on climate-related events and exhibitions. So we've looked at climate change from different angles, such as archaeology and coastal erosion and weather recording, even looking at issues out with Orkney as well. And one of the significant strengths of this work has been working in partnerships, and the partnerships we've developed through our work. And one example of that is working with Project Seagrass. It's a global charity. So we've been running talks and collaborating on events with them. And it links directly to our collection because we have some 100-year-old pressed seagrass specimens in our herbarium. And it really is a sort of cutting edge science what's going on with Project Seagrass. And in Orkney, there are groups now taking seed from Orkney seagrass and planting it in the Firth of Forth. So as a local organisation, we can help to bridge the connection with these national projects and help local Orcadians find out what's going on. We've continued to run exhibitions relevant to the climate crisis. So we had an exhibition centred on fossils, but one third of it we devoted to talking about mass extinctions and how the fossil record can inform us about the effects of climate change on our current species on Earth. So we looked at things like the IUCN Red List and how there were specimens in our museum collection that are now at risk of extinction. Sometimes collecting, the act of collecting drove them to extinction. But more recently, we had an exhibition called Nature in a Changing World that was last summer. And I would say our communication stance on the climate crisis changed between those two exhibitions. I think personally I realized maybe we were being a bit negative on the mass extinction front. It was kind of very doom and gloom and could induce climate anxiety. But what we did with Nature in a Changing World, we had a whole case in the exhibition dedicated to local climate action and celebrating projects that are happening locally. One of those was the Glasgow school run to net zero. So this was a project where the school kids got badges if they took active travel to school. And one day they shut the car park, so they had a poster for to tell people you can't take your car to school that day, you must walk or take the bike. And I think showcasing projects like that, where they're very positive, are hopefully more encouraging to visitors to see and showcase and normalise this climate action and celebrate it to try and make the story more positive. We've again been working in partnership with community initiatives, but trying to take action ourselves and work together with them to do things like beach cleans. We've been working with partners out with Orkney. This is an example of working with Creative Carbon Scotland, which we worked with them to have an event bringing together culture and arts organisations with environment and climate organisations. And it was sold out. We had loads of people there and they were really discussing how they could collaborate, and we're keeping on going with that. We've got our next one just in a few weeks' time. So it was great to partner with other organisations to deliver that. We worked with Thaw, which is a fuel poverty charity, and you really see where organisations that are completely different sectors have the same values, and how when those values align, you can really work together to do amazing stuff. Another example of that is our hot off the press launching this weekend, our snorkel trail. So we were approached by the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and they have a national network of snorkel trails all over the country. And because of our snorkel safari and marine collections, they approached us to partner with them on creating a new snorkel trail for Orkney. So the leaflets are being delivered tomorrow, and we're having a big launch party on Sunday. So we're really excited about that. I'm getting near the end now. There's just so much to talk about. But one of the last things I'd like to say is about diversifying what we're looking at. So we can't talk about the same old story over and over again. So we've been looking at new things. One of those things is plankton and tiny organisms in the sea that you can't see, but we are dependent on them. 50% of our oxygen comes from phytoplankton. Who knew? And not many people know about it or care about it. So we've been having events to do with plankton. These people here have got plankton origami, and we've seen how engaging it is for young learners and older learners as well. And it's bringing us, again, new partnerships with scientists in Orkney and away from Orkney. And going from tiny to huge, zooming out to a global perspective, something we'd like to develop in the future. We already have international partnerships with places in different places in the world, like the Pacific and the Arctic, that have originated through links in our collections. And I think those objects have the potential to help us tell global climate stories, and have voices heard from people that are affected in different places in the world. So watch this space. It's something that we definitely want to develop. in the future. So I'm going to pause here now, and I reckon some people in the audience might be thinking, oh yeah, that's quite interesting. They're doing lots of stuff, but I don't know if that's relevant to me. I don't know if the place I work or the organization I work in has much relevance to climate change. Or maybe you do, but maybe folk think if they're in an organization that's more to do with a different type of heritage, they think it's not for us. But I'd like to give you a little activity to do now to kind of make this a bit more interactive and not just me talking. I'm going to show you 4 artifacts in our museum collection. And I'd like you to choose an artifact which speaks to you personally, and then tell us how you can link it to climate change and why you chose it, just in a couple of sentences. So I'll show you the object and I'll give you, say, 5 minutes, and you can write it down if you want, and it gives you an opportunity. You can get up and stretch your legs and have a think. So here are the 4 objects, and then we'll come back and share some examples. So we can come back at, say, 41 minutes past.
Would it be worth just quickly explaining the 4 objects, just describing them very, very briefly? Would that, or would that mess up your experiment?
Well, I wanted to see if maybe if some of them were a bit more mysterious.
Cool. Okay.
I don't think it really matters, because if someone's feels a connection to one, I think it comes naturally.
Brilliant.
For some,
okay.
Because they recognize that object or they feel a connection to it. Hi there. I think, well, I've decided to do my own one as well, and I'm starting to see that people are putting their own connections in the chat, which is really good. And yeah, I think it's interesting. Everyone's chosen different things. The oil lamp, yes, and now people are, it makes them think of whaling and the kind of threat to the wildlife, but also fossil fuel to create more oil is a different type of kind of climate threat or environmental threat. Yeah, how the unpredictable weather affects people at sea. I was thinking about that. I decided to choose the boat as well, because my personal connection to it was that I did sailing when I was a teenager, and it made me think of transport and how some new innovative types of transport are being trialed in Orkney, like hydrogen planes. Yes, and the walrus skull, because of walruses appearing in areas that they don't normally appear in, and the kind of issues that come with that. Yep. And yes, Chuck, that's what I was thinking about. Different, you know, if you think about the ability we have to innovate and make new types of traveling, surely we can, just like the simplicity of sailing, using the environment to propel you forward. I think we can use the natural environment to do all sorts of things. Like in Orkney, we're doing a lot of we're pioneering tidal energy here, which comes and goes every 6 hours, so it's a sure source of energy. I'm just reading the other ones, herring and migratory routes. Yes, they're definitely having an impact on climate change, is impacting on herring and lots of different types of fish that migrate, and also the plankton that the fish eat. That's true. So what I found when we were doing the climate cafes and we did this sort of activity is it gives you a little insight into that person, that personal connection that they have with an object and why they chose it. And it also shows that people are coming at a topic from different angles. It's so simple, such a simple activity to do, but we used it in the climate cafes as a sort of discussion starter. And somebody has mentioned the Inuit carving and the impact on Inuit communities and sea ice, and that's something that I think I mentioned that our collection, we have quite a few Inuit objects, and we're in touch with different communities, and I think we've got potential to work with them. I was speaking to somebody who works in Baffin Island, and we were talking about kind of environmental impacts on marine environment, and they have obviously we both have climate change, but they also have different issues to do with mining and things like that. And I think museum collections have really got potential to start those discussions kind of globally, and bring that down to your local community level. So thank you everybody for all of those insights. It was really good to hear that you all had a connection to these objects that you might probably look at in the museum and just go, oh yes, I recognise that, but actually it has the potential to start these climate conversations too. So just before I wrap up, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to AHI for giving us the awards last year. It was a real honour, and we were up against amazing projects, which were all so good. I thought, I couldn't believe we had won because the other projects were so strong. But the press coverage that we got in Orkney, it was just amazing. That everybody was coming up to you in the street and saying well done, and people were popping into the museum to say well done and congratulating us. And we've been approached by people since then saying, can you come and talk to my group about your project, because we want to know all about it here. So it's been really good, and it means that schools can come to us and they already know we've got that. We're much more relevant. We're not just a sort of trapped in the past type of institution. So thank you very much. It made a big difference to our little museum. So that's the end of my talk, and here is my email address, so anybody is very welcome to email me and say hello or ask any questions. And if you're from somewhere else in the world that has an Orkney connection, we'd love to hear from you. We love having these international connections. It's just brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much for taking us through that story. What a fantastic story. So we've got time for a few questions. I will kick off, and there's a question I think already in the chat which I'll ask, but we need maybe a couple more. So if people could think of questions. But I was just wondering if you could, reflect on the journey, because what really came through, I think, is how it's changed your practice, from a kind of seed of an idea, an interpretive project, and how then that's kind of pivoted. I think you used the word pivoted, what you do, to create maybe an anchor organization, which is an interesting phrase again, around so much in the community. Reflecting on that, are you surprised at that? Is that something that has taken you by surprise, or was that something that you perhaps could see the potential at the beginning?
No, I don't think so. I think when I started working at Stromness Museum, I obviously, fell in love with the natural history collections, but I feel like a lot has changed in the last 5 years, just in terms of the way generally in the community that we think about climate. And I do think COP26 had a big impact. I think it was one of the sort of pivotal events that really made us think, well, we have to do something about this. We can't just sit by and do what we've always done. And I think that's happened. It's not just in our museum. It's happened in thank goodness, it's happened in nearly every museum, and it should be happening. It should be happening in lots of places. And I think people should be, seeing museums as playing their role. They'd have a big role to play. So yeah, I think it definitely, say 7 years ago, no, I didn't see it coming, but I think we've kind of adapted quickly.
Thank you. So there's a question, I think, from Song at NAI. How many volunteer staff do you have? Because it seems like the amount of events, programs, outreach is a lot for a small museum. So how do you do this, and how big is your team?
Yeah, well, we have a small team, and it's smaller than it was then. So, like a lot of small museums, we've had like grants here and there that are 1 year, 2 years, and all part-time. So at our biggest, we had a collections development team of 4 part-time staff. We had 2 exhibitions assistants. We had a collections manager and a curator, and that was at the most of our grant funding. Now we're I am 6 hours a week. We have a voluntary curator and a 4 hours a week collections manager. So as well as the the front of house team that's always there. So we do have a very small team, but we do have good volunteers, and we even have snorkel volunteers that come and help with the snorkel safaris. And
that's cool. I want to be a snorkel volunteer.
Yeah, it's a good fun job. You have to find creatures to show people, and then you have to get their attention when their head's under the water.
Fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of partnership working I can see in what you do as well with the Wildlife Trust and the Sea Search and the different initiatives, which I think is obviously enabling you to do so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So another question here, lots of really sort of lovely thoughts in the chat, which I'm sure you'll be able to read. One question from Chuck: did you have any opposition in the community to the exhibit and programming? You showed a stat there about, I think 98% were close to 98% were concerned, but did you get any sort of kickback in terms of the traditional audience to your museum, or?
I don't think we've had anything directed particularly at us. But I mean, we have had, for instance, I was involved in a dance performance, and I was a sort of invited speaker, and there was someone at the dance performance. It was an amazing, very, very moving performance by a dance artist from Australia that's dance centered around the wildfires, the bushfires, and there was an audience member that was kind of, you know, saying, well, it's crazy to think you can manage Australia without coal. And I remember we had a participant at one of our climate cafes that was sort of saying, well, climate change is natural anyway. And I don't think we've had, I think that's opposition. I think it's kind of part of the discussion, and I feel like by kind of normalizing what we're doing and making it fun and kind of trying to gather people along with us, then hopefully people that are maybe more resistant, they kind of think, well, actually, well, maybe I'm gonna look into it a bit more or think a bit differently. But some people won't anyway, they'll just continue what they think. I feel like the kind of in the last year, I would say I've noticed quite a bit more negativity towards things like renewable energy, and that it is an interesting one, and it's something I think it's changing from sort of climate denial to sort of being people who are very anti the net zero agenda and things, and that's even happening. It is happening in Orkney as well. But I think one of the things we've done, for instance, with farming, you know, we've tried to tell positive stories about how local farmers are managing their land in a positive way for wildlife. And we invited farmers in to come around the museum and have a chat and have a tour. And although they have had negative experiences with some of the pressures that they're under environmentally, they could tell us good stories about, you know, how much they really care for the environment and how much they really notice the effects of climate change. You know, they're not denying it at all. They're right in the brunt of it. So I think inviting people in and having conversations is always good, but you'll always get some.
Yeah, you will. So a different question from Steve Slack here. What's the strangest museum object you've been able to link to climate change? You might have to have a little think about that one.
Oh, that is a really interesting one. I'd have to look back at those. What we did was we made all these folders and we just started chucking images in them. A pair of sandals, a little bit of a tangential. One of them was a pair of sandals from somewhere in the world. I can't remember where they were from. I think they were from African sandals. And I was thinking, well, that kind of gets people talking about active travel and walking places, things like that. But yeah, there must be a more obscure one than that. I'll have to think about it.
That's great. So we might have time for another question if there is one. Can't see one, but I think you know, you said that the you know, other museums are doing this, but I think, you know, what you're doing really does shine through like a beacon and is well worth the Excellence in Interpretation Award, and of course the Calling Out Climate Change Award. And I hope the others on the chat here and who are watching this on catch up also think so, because it's really inspiring. So unless there's any other questions, I think we will look to close. And I'd like to really thank you, Katy, for your time today, and thank everybody for coming along and sharing this story, which I think is very inspiring. So I'll leave the final word to you, Katy. Have you got any other final thoughts on what would you say to others out there who might be sort of at the start of this journey thinking, oh, is this really going to work? There might be loads of people, we might get loads of stick in the press or whatever. What would you say to them if they're at the start of their journey as a kind of final thought?
I would say, and it's maybe an obvious one or something that gets said a lot, but I would say partnerships. Look out with your organization and find people who are really passionate about the environment and climate work as well, and then work with them, because strength in numbers, and you can learn a lot from other. I mean, we've learned a huge amount from different people in different scientific disciplines that we've been working with, and it's amazing to have these people on, in your phone. You can just ask a plankton expert, oh, can you tell me that statistic about seabirds and sand eels, and someone can get back to you and tell you where to look. So yeah, I think partnerships are the key.
Fantastic. The power of interpretation and the power of partnerships. That's a lovely way to finish. So thank you so much. I'm sure everybody is clapping at their screens. And is Chuck, are you there to round off? Maybe not. I know Chuck is on the West Coast in a remote cabin on his phone internet, so he might not be able to join us. Oh, there you are, Chuck. You managed to boot your phone up.
Yeah, I got bounced off at least once, and Katy, I just want to, last Friday, I just toured a new exhibit.
Oh.
Ooh. Oh no, we lost you.
Are you there,
Salt Lake
Chuck?
City, Utah, which is kind of inner mountain west of the United States. They have a brand new exhibit called Guys. It's totally different audiences. Oh, can you?
Sorry,
you were breaking up most of the time there. You might need to put it in the chat or try again quickly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There's just a new exhibit. I'm going to put the two of you together, a university museum in the Rocky Mountains of the United States and yourselves. And this is just such an inspiration, and it will be for them too.
Oh, lovely. Look forward to it. Thank you.
And as we all know, that heritage interpretation is a seed, not a tree. And Katy's planted wonderful seeds in Orkney. And I really want to thank everyone for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks very much.